Good afternoon, and thank you for your interest in this breakout session. It's a full room. It's really encouraging. And the desserts, and had enough caffeine in your veins to kick it off. So this is the first breakout that focuses on the net zero food systems, which, as you have heard, is one of our 3 missions we'd like to invest in going forward and make real, tangible impact, scalable impact. And this is really the warm-up session for tomorrow's workshops. Considering that the EU has already set targets for making the land use sector net zero by 2025, so much some has anticipated, including that the EU is pursuing its efforts carbon border adjustments, ESG reporting, and also including agriculture and food into the emissions trading scheme. I think net zero will become even more important to focus on and also then deliver. So, but it's not up. We have a great panel now to discuss net zero, how we can get of 4 speakers. I named them the 4 critical elements for a healthy and sustainable food system. So we will have someone talking about soil, we will have someone talking about water, someone talking about nutrients, and the 4th element is data, of course, in this day and age. So 4 key elements, and I would like to start by inviting Stephanie to stay. So she's the Vice President for EU Governmental Relations and Communications for Yara, and she's our nutrition person. So Tiffany, please.
Thank you. It's Chuck's presentation first. Can you? Okay, perfect. That's yours. So let's. Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you very much for the invitation and for the possibility to basically present our contribution as Yara. So at Yara, we are basically producing and selecting nutrients to help get plates full of healthy food. So basically, if we want to think, what does that mean to me as a consumer? Basically, if your berries are sweet, it's because there's sufficient potash into it through the process. And if your baguette, I'm French, so I had to bring that example. If your baguette is crispy, this is because there has been sufficient plant nutrition and nitrogen in the way. So basically, plant nutrition is key when we talk about sustainable food systems and also to reach a net zero future. So as Yara, we have started our journey on this a couple of years ago, and the final destination is clear. It's climate neutrality. We're taking it in steps, and the first step is really to have been looking at the greenhouse gas intensity for the production of fertilizers. So scope 1 and scope 2 emissions for the insiders here. As you know, it's linked to the use of including and mainly natural gas, and we really need to limit the greenhouse gas emissions through this production process. So we have developed different processes and density. We have reduced it by 10% since 2008. And we also now working towards the greenhouse gas absolute target 2030. And there we are now rolling out the roadmaps, and it goes plant by plant. In Europe, we have 18 plants, so this is quite some work that our team on climate and energy is doing very actively. As I said, ultimately, the goal is climate neutrality, and to that end, in Europe, we have already reduced our greenhouse gas 5% since 2005 in CO2 equivalents. But we have also to acknowledge that if we look at the whole emission profile of the fertilizer sector, the emissions that are linked to our production, scope 1 and scope 2, are about 23% of the whole emission profile. So 62% of the emissions of the whole value chain happen in the fields. So there's no way we can stop it there, and this is also what I'm going to talk next, because we really need to decarbonize our entire food value chain. So basically, the idea we have and the way we tackle it is to combine climate and nature. Really, we want to make sure we can reach the two main goals of reaching net zero food system, but also doing in a nature positive way. Here we believe that regenerative agriculture is a key pathway to get there, considering the four key elements, of course, soil health, biodiversity, climate, and also resource use. We have also developed and supporting a couple of initiatives, and we believe, you know, if we look into traceability, which is our daughter company Varda is doing, if we look into carbon farming, our Agro-Carbon Alliance is looking into more globally than in Europe for now, and also looking into clean ammonia and the carbon footprinting. We have different elements to help us to also back the progress and also sustain the way towards net zero. Because ultimately what we believe is important is to move away from progressively from what I would say an action-based approach to an outcome-based approach. It's important that we make sure that we track the progress, and traceability and data are key enablers to get there. But as I said, we need to decarbonize our whole and full value chain. There's no way we can do that alone. Here we are also in a way considering that there's no way we can reach the critical mass we need to reach this net zero food system unless we collaborate more. So there are different ways, and I've been here highlighting three, but I could have a much busier slide, but for the sake of time I focused on three. The first approach is basically collaborating with farmers more and more through all the agronomists we have in Europe to help them to make every nutrient count. Now we have the situation we know in the context of the war in Ukraine and the concerns regarding affordability and availability of fertilizers in Europe. But even before that, we have been supporting farmers to really make sure that every nutrient they put into the system is used the best possible way to reduce nutrient losses, and this is of course contributing ultimately to net zero. Into the different best practices and tools we have identified, such as farming, we can improve the efficiency of the nutrients used, carbon footprint linked to the use of mineral fertilizers at field by 20%. So the potential is there, and it's really about upscaling those good practices together with farmers. Another approach we're taking that helps to continue to decarbonize the whole value chain is what we call green fertilizers. So as I said, today mineral fertilizers are produced using natural gas, and we are now piloting a production of mineral fertilizers with renewable energy. So we replace the natural gas by the renewable energy. In that case, we are electrifying one of our plants in Europe to that end. And this helps to have mineral fertilizers which have a carbon footprint which is 80 to 90% lower at factory gates than the current products we find on the market. And for us as consumers, this means that our loaf of bread is 12% lower in terms of carbon footprint. And there we are working on a partnership with Swedish farmers who will be the first ones as part of the commercial agreement we have to use these green fertilizers already next year in Sweden. And they will get a premium from the Swedish cooperative Lantmännen for using these green fertilizers. And we also need to join forces and build partnerships. And one example of that is, of course, the partnership we have with other partners in the and EIT Food in the context of the European Carbon Plus Farming Coalition, where there we are working together to identify what are the main bottlenecks to upscale climate smart practices, and how can we really make sure that we involve farmers' transformation process, because that's one of the key aspects. And another a partnership we have is, for instance, with Danone in Spain, and that's where the picture is from, where we are upscaling regenerative farming practices together with Spanish farmers on the ground. Coming to my last slide, you know, basically now we are a little bit, we are very much, I would even say, at the crossroads. External shocks, some positive, like COVID, in terms of the resilience of the food system, but also some external shocks like climate-related events, and also the current war in Ukraine are putting a lot of stress on our food system. And it is basically showing that our food system needs to be more resilient, more robust, and more sustainable. And the challenge is that we need to accelerate this transformation whilst also accelerating the transformation of the European industry. So we are very much in a crossroads situation, and we believe it's imperative that we don't lose the sight and the goal to reach net zero food system because of the current war in Ukraine and possible short-term decisions that would be made across the different players of the value chain. So to succeed on this transition, we believe there are three key elements that we need to work together. The first one, as I said, is to upscale regenerative agriculture practices, and maybe in the conversation we'll discuss a little bit how can that happen, to accelerate the use of renewable energy, and also to boost the strategic autonomy of Europe's food and fertilizer sector, because it's a key pillar of the global food security as well. And by that, I'll thank you for your attention and invite the next panelist.
Thank you, Tiffany, for your introductory remarks, and thanks to also Yara for working with us on the EU Carbon Plus Farming Coalition. To continue, I would like to invite Angela Magno to stage. She is the R&D project manager for BioZoom, and she will talk about water as a key enabler.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Barbaros. Okay, well, I am Angela Magno. Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. I am R&D project manager and director of communication and marketing at BioZoom. Well, I will start to present to myself and explain what is BioZoom. We are located in Spain, in the south, in Malaga, and we are engineering and technology consultancy, very active in research and development activities. We have a high experience in all the R&D framework program from the European Commission, and we are focused on the development of innovative solutions, mainly for sustainable water management. And the water reuse that we think, and is across all my presentation, is part of our DNA. We offer tailored solutions for the treatment and reuse of water and recovery of resources based on the technology that we develop in different R&D projects across Europe. Well, just present my company. I always present some world figures regarding water. The 17% of the Earth's surface is water, but only 2.5 of this is fresh water, and only 1% of the general water in the world is able to use for human consumption and economic activities, mainly in urban sector, in industrial sector, but the main user of this water is agricultural sector. That is mainly focused in the food ecosystem that we are talking today. Well, according to the Science Advice for Policy by European Academy, a sustainable food system is which provides and promotes safe, nutrition, and healthy food, environmental impact for all current and future European citizens. And also, this definition includes how to make this system and how to provide the food according to the world. But now I would like to focus in the sustainable agri-food system. The World Economic Forum has just published a report on the pathway for the European to transform the food system in agri-food sustainable system. And this if say that if just more or less the 20% of the farmers adopt some kind of climate smart agriculture, by the 2030, all the Europe could reduce its annual agricultural greenhouse gases emission by 6% and improve the soil health over an area equivalent to 14%. So I think that the sustainable agri-food system is something that all of us can achieve in the future, but we have many challenges to achieve. The main challenges are linked to malnutrition, biodiversity loss, climate change, soil degradation, and the water quality. The world's growing population will lead to 50% increase in the demand for food around the 2050, unless there are changes that include impact in the behavior patterns and in the consumer pattern and level of the food waste generated. Therefore, ensuring safe and nutritious food for all is a major issue in Europe, and globally is reflected in the growing attention that different institutions at international and European level give to the food system. For example, in the last European Green Deal, we find the Farm to Fork strategy. And also there are several initiatives as the European Food Forum, the EU Carbon Plus Farming Initiative, and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, more than 7 Sustainable Development Goals focusing food systems. Here you can see, I think that a lot of us know this picture that shows the water stress at world level. And if in Europe, if 50% of the wastewater will be reclaimed, it means treat according to the use that we need to the water, this water stress will be reduced by 5% in 1 year. Okay, so I want to go directly for the water reuse. The water reuse is a hot topic in Europe, and you can see that there are several legislations, several directives, and a lot of communication regarding how the water reuse could be implied in the agro-food systems. And also the Water Europe vision of this value of the water can include or can give an idea about the water reuse could be a real driver to achieve a more sustainable food agri-food system. For example, reducing the impact of European society in our natural water resource. Or, for example, if we use the reclaimed water, we know that is a climate adaptation measuring, according to different and several projects that have already measured the impact of the use of reclaimed water. Or, for example, boosting the European water market as well as the global competitiveness of the European water industry in the framework of European international business. So now I just go for a couple of examples of our project related to water reuse. Rich Water is a project that Azul coordinates. It's part of the Horizon 2020. And it was focused on the application and the market introduction of combined wastewater treatment and reuse technology for agricultural purpose. This project showed the possibility not only about safe water with the water treatment, but also safe nutrients. The idea is that close the water cycle including the nutrients. If we reclaim the water, it means if we treat the wastewater, we have two main sources that pass through the residue from waste to a raw material that can be including the saving of fertilizer or achieve best practices for farmers in how to irrigate and fertilize the soil. Also, again, I think that is very linked to my college, the soil degradation that normally is with higher amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. This technology, we are happy because it was verified by the European Commission Environmental Technology Verification. That is a program that can validate that the technology is sure, safe, and improve at the European standard. And also we received an award and regional level, Malaga Viva, that recognize the experience and action against climate change. And also Water Europe Innovation Award in the category of water technology and infrastructure in the 2021. They recognize that rich water contributing to the sustainability of the agri-food system. Finally, Rich Water, that is located in Malaga, in the area of Asarquia, is well known about the avocado, because we are one of the main producers at European level of avocado, and we have a very big issue with the water for the irrigation. Was selected as one of the water-oriented living lab atlas that the Water Europe have around the world. So I want to say just one more example about Prima that was this morning, was introduced by Angelo. Here we have one of our projects that is for reuse, which aims to offer safe and sustainable solution for the integrated use of non-conventional water resource in the Mediterranean agriculture sector. In this project, we also include the reclaimed water as one of the permanent water resource that is not variable by the time or by the natural condition. So just to finish, I want to highlight that the real sustainability of agri-food system, is possible, but we need to choose driver and measure that could be affordable and sure and safe for farmers that finally will be mainly the high pressure on their to try to be real and to be sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela, for shedding light on the water issue. And next up line, we have Chuck de Liederkerke, who is the co-founder and CEO of Soil Capital, and they are doing amazing work on the ground. So we go to the element of soil.
I don't have slides. I don't know for the feed, should I? Hi everyone. So I'll start by reminding us all of a simple fact, and most of you probably know this. Plants suck. They have this amazing ability to suck carbon out of the sky and the atmosphere and store it into the vegetation, into the soil. And this matters because they're one of the few industries that can actually do this. You know, when we look at agriculture today, we tend to forget that plants suck because agriculture is an emitting sector today. And well, if you think about it, we're in a system today which is resource intensive, it's input intensive, and it's extractive in terms of natural fertility. And on the other hand, regenerative agriculture, by storing carbon and by leveraging the way the ecosystem naturally grows stuff, can improve the fertility of soils and store carbon into the ground for the short, medium, and potentially long term if we manage these soils correctly. So, you know, at Soil Capital, we're excited about that. But when you know that more than 50% of today's youth between 15 and 25 years old globally are deeply concerned about the environment, it doesn't matter just to 30-something guys in Belgium here, it matters to tomorrow's market and tomorrow's voters. So that's really important for us. The team at Soil Capital are people who are computer geeks, some finance nuts like myself, but mostly they're farmers. They come from family farms, they've studied agronomy, they've worked on farms. And this really matters to us because something we should remind ourselves of as constantly as we can is that none of us in this room, unless you're a farmer, in which case I applaud you, none of us in this room are actually going to change anything. The farmers on the ground are going to do that. And we can play a role in accompanying these farmers only if we manage to support them in practicing agriculture in the right way. And I think farming is difficult. Probably regenerative farming is difficult as well. I think it's even more difficult to change a farmer's mind, especially in a context when the farmers are being put in a corner, financially, socially, and they think everyone's against them. Then that's why at Soil Capital it's so important for us to think like farmers. And then we use tech just as a way to scale the support we bring to farmers in delivering farm-level practice change. So what do we do? Well, actually, let's start with what farmers do. And let's put it in overly simplistic terms. Every year, a farmer will prepare the land and seed a crop. Then he'll protect and fertilize his crop. And then he'll harvest it, or she'll harvest it. At Soil Capital, we want to work with farmers so they do things a little bit differently. Planting a cover crop before their cash crop. Reducing land preparation. Optimizing, well, seeding a greater diversity of crops. Adapting and optimizing their fertilization and protection package. And then, if they do all of this, which will have the effects to reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, but also store carbon into the soil, well, actually, they can harvest a low carbon, carbon neutral, or potentially even carbon negative crop. And gets us really excited, not just for scope 3 carbon reductions, supply chain reductions reasons, but also because carbon is such a good driver of natural fertility. And this is the reason why the farmers that store carbon are going to be around for the long term. So we've developed an app that does two things. Well, actually it does three things, but there are two nice outcomes. The three things it does, it measure, manage, and monetize their greenhouse gas emissions and stores of carbon. So in 2020, Soil Capital launched the first certified carbon payment program for broadacre farmers in Western Europe. And we brought in at that moment around 120 farmers into the program. So the two things we do is we incentivize farmers and we provide them with the insights as to how to achieve the best carbon emissions reductions for the year in front of them. And through insights and analytics, we get farmers to change. Now, maybe a few words about how they're incentivized. The idea is we don't work alone. Obviously, farmers will be able to improve on their greenhouse gas footprint, generate certificates, but on the other side, there are buyers of carbon certificates. Who are these buyers? Well, precisely most of the businesses that have made very ambitious commitments to net zero, to reducing their scope 3 emissions today. If they're in the food and ag value chain, well, a significant portion of their emissions are coming from the farmers themselves. And if you want to incentivize the farmers, well, this is probably a nice way to do it. And just as a proof point of this, the first 120 farmers we brought in 2020, 80% of them actually improved their carbon emissions in the first year alone. So that's 100 farmers generating carbon certificates. We distributed about 10,000 euros per farmer, which in the context of a European farm is a meaningful amount. This matters for the corporates who've made these commitments because many of them aren't able to access the farmers. There are too many intermediaries between them, the transformers, the cooperatives. And when you can't talk to your farmer and you've made a commitment that they control, then potentially here we have a solution. And so we've worked with the likes of Cargill, of AB InBev, not only in pilots, but now we're scaling this. We are working now with more than 600 farmers on over 150,000 hectares in France, Belgium, and the UK on broadacre farming today, but there's more to be done on the livestock side as well. And I think what we can see today is that farmers who are generating carbon certificates are doing their part. They're enabling the corporates they supply to actually do their part. And so if together we can recognize this and turbocharge this, then I think we have a very valuable key to unlocking some of the wider challenges that policymakers, but society and the environment have set for ourselves. So that's it on my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck, for the introductory remarks. And I'd like to invite Professor Nigel Scollin to stage. He is the Director for Global Food Security at the Queen University of Belfast. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you to EIT Food for the opportunity to be here today and to speak to you on what is absolutely one of the biggest challenges that we have in society today. I'll just find the slide changer if it's disappeared. Slide changer? No, I was going to stand out here. Sorry, brilliant. This is where one gets fooled with the technology. Let's see, is it this way? Oops, no, it's not that way. Big button. It should be so obvious, but not to me. Okay, so great to be with you. So I just want to spend a few minutes running through some issues on decarbonising the agri-food supply chain. Now, needless to say, this room, and we heard it mentioned this morning and many, many times before, greenhouse gas emissions associated with the agri-food system are rather large. Globally, it's about a third of greenhouse gas emissions are associated with agri-food. So it's a major, major challenge. Agriculture within agri-food is a major, major player. Hence the conversations we just had in the last 30 minutes emphasize that. But if you look in the EU, the major countries contributing to emissions are France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Italy. And the progress that we're making in reducing emissions from agriculture are actually rather modest. If we break that down a little bit further as to where those emissions come from, then it's from enteric fermentation, the big one on the left-hand side there. It's from soils, it's from manure management, etc. And when we think about enteric fermentation, that gets us into the area of ruminant animals and the whole area in around methane. So that's where the big tensions sit in agriculture. Now, I think, Chuck, this builds nicely on what you were describing very well, because when we think about net and zero, it's very important to recognize that they are two words, net and zero. So what it means is that in any industry or for ourselves, we actually are emitters, we contribute to emissions, but equally, agriculture is the only industry that also has the opportunity and plays an important role in sequestration. Net is the difference between where emissions come from and sequestration. That's an extremely important point for agriculture. So we have emissions and we have sequestration. What's also very, very important to remember when we're talking about emissions from agriculture and sequestration, one has to consider the whole farm system. You cannot simply look at the animal, at the crop, at the soil, at the hedgerows, at the trees. You need to look at this whole system. But you also need to be able to measure, report, and Chuck to continue, to verify what we are measuring and reporting. That is the single biggest challenge and the opportunity, and it's absolutely critical for our sector, and it is in the hands of our farmers. They will drive behavioural change, but by working in partnership with us all in this room and many others not here. But are we able to measure it today? The answer to that is no. We can get estimates on it, largely getting estimates on the emissions. But when we come to the sequestration side of it, how do we actually measure, Chuck, carbon in soil, carbon in trees, carbon in hedgerows? How do you actually do that? How do you actually build that system? So at the moment, our farmers and our sector is only noted for its emissions and not for its sequestration by IPCC. Fact. That's a major problem, but also a major opportunity. Farmers must be accredited for the net. So as we go forward, we will be able to measure both the emissions and the sequestration. And what I will envisage over the next 10 to 15 years is actually instrumentation of that landscape and measurement of emissions as sequestration and reporting thereof. So to give you a quick handle, this is in relation to UK agriculture. And actually, I just want to highlight, we have a major challenge here. Okay, you can read it for yourselves. And I could translate this across Europe as well. Major challenge, major opportunity to address. And when we're talking about carbon sequestration, this is across all industries from this slide, but the left-hand side, we're very much focused on ideas in agriculture. So sequestration in soil, sequestration in trees and hedgerows and so on and so on. So an absolute drive on mitigation is critical, but equally a drive on sequestration on the journey to net zero. Very briefly, one of the projects we're working on within EIT Food, which is very much focused on ruminant red meat agriculture from beef and sheep, is actually to do with building the tools for measurement and verification on a livestock farm of the carbon emissions, but also the sequestration. So this is a project that we've been working on over the last 18 months, headed up by Queen's involving Reading, ABP Food Group, CNR in Italy, Agricolas, and an SME called ZELP, where we built the tools to measure, and we're also very engaged in approaches to mitigate methane from ruminant animals. But just to emphasize, the measurement is absolutely critical. If you cannot measure, you cannot manage. But you also cannot drive behavioral change at farm level, or indeed in any of us and what we do. Do you know your carbon footprint? Have you got it? Have you got the app? Do you absolutely know where you are on your journey? No, you don't. So that's the opportunity which is critical at a farm level. And just to note that in the ruminant sector, one of the areas that this project is very much working on is actually the development of tools to be able to measure at an individual animal methane release from the mouth of the animal, but actually to be able to, if you like, oxidize that methane as it's released from the animal, nullifying its effects, as well as working on solutions for mitigating methane from release in the rumen of these animals using various nutritional additives. A really interesting and promising area, and I expect to see dramatic reductions in methane over the next 10 to 15 years from ruminant agriculture. So I'm just going to end with a few thoughts. There's different ways of doing this, but it's really a call for action. There's a need for dramatic action in all industry sectors, but I firmly believe that agriculture has a huge opportunity to contribute to both mitigation opportunities, but also increasing sequestration. But there's challenges. There are a lot of barriers, for example, in legislation that must be dealt with, must be made easier for industry and including our farmers to be able to deal with change. And we need agreed methodologies from being able to measure and report at a whole farm level the whole space in around greenhouse gases. And we're on it. We must also remember that there is more to life than greenhouse gas emissions. We do have major challenges with water quality and air quality from our industry and from other industries. So we must keep things in perspective as we move to improve the quality of our industry overall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Scollin. So maybe I would just now invite our panelists to the stage, and we will open the discussion to the floor. But before we do that, I'd just like to kick off with a quick question, and I'd like short answers from each one of you. For us to get to net zero, or maybe start talking about net positive, in your opinion, what are the lowest hanging fruits or sort of quick wins so that we can get there as fast as possible and maybe meet the 2035 target? But in getting there and start talking about net positive, what is the biggest hurdles? What is the biggest challenge, largest bottleneck? What is stopping us? And what can we do as a collective, this ecosystem, but also partnering with others so that we can start tackling those things? So if I can have a few words from each of you, it'll be great.
Okay, I don't mind kicking off. So I would say one of the biggest challenges we've got in here is the data end of it, and being able to be able to have agreed approaches to measurement of emissions and sequestration. That aspect is absolutely critical to driving and supporting change at a farm level. Absolutely critical. And if just to pick up then on the barriers for that, it's basically access to agreed tools that are internationally accepted, but also then working together as an industry and at a pre-competitive level to really drive the creation of the knowledge, the sharing of that knowledge to dramatically reduce emissions, and on the other hand, to dramatically increase sequestration opportunities.
Well, I think that I go to my way to the water, because I think that one of the backbones in the water and in the agri-food system is that normally we talk about waste. We well know that there are a lot of waste, too much waste, but we forget it that we have different kinds of waste. There are food waste, that is directly the food that you don't consume and go throw out. But there are the raw material that you could reuse, or you can make profit or reduce, and you have no idea. For example, the water and the nutrient that I mentioned. So for me, the idea is that we need to rethink about the value of the waste that we have in the food in the agri-food system. It's not only the problem with the emission. It's not problem the food directly the food waste that we throw out. It's also all the material that we use in all the circle that is the value chain, and that we miss in a lot of the step of the value. For example, the water, the nutrient that you can include and close the loop. So if we really go for a circular economy also within the food value chain, we can reduce waste, emissions, raw material, etc.
Yeah, I would say from our perspective, the easy tool that we could upscale would be precision farming. It's there, it exists, and it's about growing the confidence of farmers that they're making a right choice, and when the tools are also promising and sustaining improvements, those can be verified and possibly accounted for. So if we look into the area of nutrient management with farm systems like the ones you have been presenting, basically we have a similar tool inside Yara, and farmers can reduce the use of nitrogen fertilizer on average by 12%. and that can increase yields up to 7%. And this is there, it exists, it's for free for farmers to use. So it's really how do we scale up the knowledge that it exists, and this is a valuable tool. And I would say the main barrier, also to build on what you said, is basically what kind of model do we work collectively in the food value chain to share the risks, to share the costs of transforming? There's no way, when I mentioned the green fertilizers we have been developing, it's 4 to 5 times more expensive than fertilizers now, at least before the recent events. There's no way we can expect farmers to pay that price alone. So how do we find a system that the whole food value chain shares the cost of the transformation? And if I can add into that spectrum, it has been mentioned by several colleagues here. Let's have the same conversation next year with the farmer as well, because they are the agent of change, and we're all there to support them. And this is about increasing their confidence that they can change and still make a living and give the farm to the next generation.
Thank you.
So low-hanging fruits on the soil carbon side. I think the easy answer to that is we've seen that incentives plus insights works. We can actually deliver farm-level practice change with those two elements. And maybe just to take a step back and understand what that means, you need a system that works for the farmer, and you need a system that works for the carbon buyer. That's it. Policymakers, academia, etc., will find their place behind one of these two stakeholders, because it needs to be practical for farmers. They need to engage. They need to keep producing. They need to maintain their productivity, etc., etc. And on the buyer side, this needs to be scientifically robust. It needs to be credible. It needs to make economical sense. So if you solve just for the carbon buyer and the farmer, you probably will have solved for many other stakeholders as well. Now, let's look at the two sides of that equation. And let's start with the carbon buyer. For a program to be scientifically robust and for someone to want to buy carbon certificates today, maybe some of you in the room are buyers of carbon certificates, there need to be a number of criteria. At a minimum, there needs to be some degree of scientific consensus that what we're measuring is real. Maybe IPCC doesn't have the right model, but if there's no consensus, then forget about it. Second, there needs to be some verifiability. Nigel, you mentioned it, that's perfectly accurate. There needs to be some degree of permanence in the change that is achieved and in the carbon that is being stored in the soil. Number 4, there needs to be this notion of additionality, which means in today's world, we can't be paying farmers for something that they would be doing anyways. But I hope in tomorrow's world, and I hope we'll get a chance of discussing this later, we should be paying farmers for every unit of carbon every additional unit of carbon they aggregate into their soil, and possibly even they maintain into their soil. But let's discuss that. If you want to make sure, damn sure, that everything is perfect, you can measure and verify yourself into oblivion. And it can be super expensive and not engaging at all for the farmer. And so there's a balance that needs to be found. For the farm, we need to accept that we're not going to be perfect today, but we're going to be improving every day. And I think that's a principle that the industry needs to go by, continuous improvement. There are enough elements on these 4 criteria for a secure carbon market to actually get the ball rolling with the farmers. And then for the farmers, from our perspective, I think the farmers are under too much regulatory and administrative constraints today. There will be some degree of additional social violence if we force the farmers to do more, but incentives work really, really well. And the carbon program we've developed works with positive incentives, and we see that works. So, we can share plenty of experience as to how that worked, but to the first question, which is what are the low-hanging fruits? A carbon payment program will be a good start. Good start.
Thank you, Chuck. So I'd like to open a discussion to the floor. So if you have questions, I will be walking around. So I'll start in the back. Then maybe I already give you the floor. Give me a second person. I'm coming. Thank you. Please.
Thank you so much. Maybe if I talk like this, can you hear me? All right. Thank you for the
Try again with the mic.
Oh, check 1, 2. Great. Thank you for the presentation. Really interesting. Gone again, and back maybe. There was some mention of alternatives to traditional chemical. Sustainable fertilizer to net zero food systems, and second, we've seen that more sustainable fertilizers have been very expensive or other not available in industrial quantities that are relevant to industry. Is that expected to change in the next 10 years? Is that sort of a pipe dream 20 years off? What's the current feeling of how available it will be in the short run?
So I guess that question is for me. But I invite you to complement. So to start with the last question. So when I mentioned the green fertilizers that we will start to put on the market next year, our ambition is to have 1/3 of the ammonia, which is the main building block to produce these fertilizers, to be green by 2030. So that's one key element. In addition, we have several projects going on to also use carbon capture and storage, as you mentioned, at plant level. So blue ammonia is also part of the transition to get there. And regarding your first question, basically, when we talk about food, half of the persons here in this room, you've been fed through the use of mineral fertilizers at farm level. I'm not saying this is like a killer argument. This doesn't mean we need to optimize. This doesn't mean we need to reduce. This doesn't mean we need to diversify. We need to do the three of them in parallel. And this is where the examples you mentioned about stop wasting our food waste. This is key, and we're looking into that as Yara. We are involved in a partnership with the waste management company Veolia to work on what we call the Nutrient Upcycling Alliance. It's in London and the surroundings, where we recycle the food waste from London and the surroundings to use it as an organomineral or an organic fertilizer with recycled nutrients to produce then the food. And there, the main challenge, so that could actually be a barrier. The main challenge we face is to access sufficient amount of waste of the same nature at the same place. Because there's no point for us or our partners, in that case Veolia, to ship trucks around Europe to collect that waste, to really be also net zero. So that would be my answer to your question. Hope it was...
Well, I just want to complement. The question is, the issue is that fertilizer is something that if you want to have your profit of your crop as farmer, you need to use your fertilizer, because we have the problem with the soil, that we have high degradation of the soil across all Europe. So fertilizers is part of our agriculture. But the issue is that we need to change the patterns that the farmers have to fertilize, because the agriculture, the farmers are used to use too much fertilizers and not take account the impact of the production of the fertilizer, and also to include the fertilizer in the land. Because if you have too much fertilizer in the land, you produce soil degradation. So, for example, the use of reclaimed water is the idea is that you include the nutrient that you have in the wastewater. The wastewater, for sure, also can have the pathogens or whatever that could be removed of the water, but also include all the all the nutrients that the food have. So if you use these nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, to the water, one that you are irrigate the crops, you are also fertilize the crop, and you can measure how much fertilizer you are including just with the water, because it's enriched water that you use. So from us, it's very, very important that we take into account that it's not only the issue of the waste, it's how to use the reduce that you use for production, for irrigate, for all the value chain, because these wastes are in real and the new raw material that you can include in the water chain, reducing of the emissions that we are talking about.
Tom Zollner, Farm Tech Society. We represent controlled environment agriculture, so a little bit niche. But my question is that, you know, we are very well aware of very interesting solutions on how to tackle this. Even academically, the challenges are well identified. Everything is relatively clear on the table. However, the EU has also, basically pushed precision agriculture with all its tools for many years, with lots and lots of funding opportunities and lots of instruments. Still, when you look at the overall adoption rate by the practicing farming community, it just hovers in a very small percentage. And I have been thinking about this problem and why that is, and why we need to overcome that in the first place before we can even talk about carbon sequestration. Because, even in a country like Belgium, where 9 out of 10 farmers have a satellite-guided tractor, most of them don't know how to use it, or they don't use it for whatever reason. I think there is an inherent issue here where we need to really discuss on how to really create a better adoption, and I would like to hear your ideas to this particular question.
Maybe we take 2 more questions and then we collect the answers.
You can hear me okay? So Stephen Connolly is my name, working with ABP. I suppose my question, or maybe it's going to be an argument, and it's probably a question for each of you, is it took at a food conference till 5:30 to mention ruminants and beef. I think the only comment we had at the start was that we had to change our diets. But I think I'd like to, probably Nigel and Chuck, the role of ruminants to helping us hit net zero. Like we mentioned regenerative agriculture and cereal. I think people forget the role that animals can have in improving the soil with regards to dung, manure. I'd just like to get your comments on that, because I think it's been really forgotten today, and they can play a huge role in that, so that would be my question and comment.
Hi, I'm Hila from the World Food Program. I wanted to ask regarding carbon credits. From what I'm learning, is that sometimes there's a delay between, let's say, the carbon, credit activities that a farmer does versus the time that they receive, let's say, the verification and the funding thereafter, the incentive. So I just wanted to ask you about your learnings in this, let's say, sphere of the time gap. Thanks so much.
Thank you. One more question, and then.
Thank you. Well, first of all, congratulations. I think good presentations, and it's very necessary that we have these innovative approaches to do something. So don't misunderstand my being a bit critical, especially on the verification. You mentioned yourself, I forgot your name, from Soil Capital.
Chuck.
You mean verification, science-based, etc. There's a parallel network to this one, which is called EJP Soil, European Joint Partnership, which is about trying to do science on soil and carbon capture and climate change. And if you go to them, which I'll do Wednesday, and I've been following that, there is no scientific, let's say, unanimity on how to measure or even verify on a short-term carbon capture in the soil. So, and probably it's not possible from year to year because of climatic variations at any one place. So I would like to hear more about how are you actually doing this, and what is the scientific evidence for what you must estimate something from a farmer's practice into this amount of carbon captured. And then one last question on that. You put on your website that there's no binds. You're not bound for a long time. So if I'm a company and pay for the carbon capture on a farm, what is my security that in 20 years' time there will still be this carbon in his soil. He didn't change. So, can
Thank
you
you.
enlighten us a bit about your approach, please?
Yeah, I can take the precision farming question because we've been asking ourselves the same question. We thought first that subscription fees or the costs of investments could be the main barrier. So this is why we lifted the access and the subscriptions for most of our digital tools or handheld tools that farmers can use. This helps, but this is not a killer. And I think the killer is maybe that we need to increase the trust. And ultimately, this is about certifying that when farmers commit to this or that, the use of that precision tool, they will be able also to be sure about the results it will bring. So that's also an idea we've been floating around towards EU decision makers to think of some kind of certification schemes that different tools could be basically confirming their support in order to increase the trust of the farmers so we get that scale. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, having thanks for the question on the ruminant livestock side. Like, I guess the room might say I might be biased, but I'll try not to be biased. But in brief, ruminants are a critical part of the food system, and you know, they're absolutely essential in terms of providing nutrients that society needs, including particularly the micronutrients, and that's an area that often is forgotten within what is a very emotive subject. You know, it's all very well saying we need to reduce or remove and increase plants, but we must be very careful that we're delivering micronutrients through to society. So the health angle is really, really important. The animals, of course, play a very important part within the farm ecosystem. And Chuck, I think we'd both agree that the animal is absolutely critical for the management of that landscape out there, but also the conversion effectively of plant material that we cannot utilize. And there's large, large amounts of it in the world. But the ruminant animal converts plant-based material effectively into protein and into essential micronutrients. And it does that by a very smart rumen ecosystem and the use of some very smart bugs. But it has a byproduct which is called methane. But it's a byproduct of converting plant material into protein and other micronutrients. Really, really smart. But nobody thinks like that. They just focus on the negatives. Completely wrong. The final part is the contribution that animals play in terms of manures back into soil and improving and maintaining soil nutrient status, which of course is critical to all our food production systems.
Yeah, I have very little to add except the fact that for the moment a program like ours is open to broadacre crops, but we are in need of bringing in a model for livestock that actually reflects the positive role that livestock can have. There's this saying that I hear in the US sometimes, it's not the cow, it's the how. How you manage the livestock. And so I think that needs to be reflected appropriately. For the moment, we haven't found a model we're satisfied with, and that's why it's not there. But we need it, and we need it fast.
And maybe I think regarding the how to drive the innovation from the project to the reality, well, from the point of view of water engineering, we have many challenges with this because the main problem is the different authorities at different levels. Okay, for example, we work in R&D European projects, and we develop several technology. We have already verified and testified technology that could be used for reclamation of water. But the issue is that different authorities and different countries at different levels have different areas, So I think that Europe is making a high effort to try to give in the same way. For example, with the water directive that was approved the last year and will be will be running this year. I think that we are going in a good way. But the issue is that now, for me, I think that the next bottle will be change the consumer ideas also, because reclaimed water, for example, is it's a good word because it's not used wastewater. But normally the consumer, when you talk that you are consuming wastewater, they think in the not good idea that their own wastewater from their houses is used for the crop. So the idea is that we need to work in both sides. The regulation to try to harmonize the idea and to harmonize that the innovation in reclamation, for example, will be one of the main solutions for Europe in order that all of us will be safe water to use in agriculture, which is a main concern in Europe. And in the other side, that is, for example, EIT Food make a huge effort in the include the consumer also in the R&D, because in Europe I think that maybe miss this part. The consumer, the final actor in the value chain, in the food value chain, should be included in the technology, in the problem, in the innovation, and in the concern that we have already solutions that will be tested, that they are safe, and that could be improve their life or in general.
Thank you. And
There are a few questions on the delay and permanence.
Sure.
Shall I?
If
I'll
everyone's
try
okay
to
with
answer
that.
them really fast because I'm
Yeah.
conscious of time.
Yeah.
So on the delay piece, today farmers in our program get paid 6 months after the end of a season, which is nice. But there's something much more important that you're pointing to, which is farmers that have been pioneering regenerative agriculture for 20 years aren't necessarily paid anymore because the additionality principle doesn't work. And so people will estimate that they're doing this anyways, they don't need a payment. That needs to change for two reasons. There's a fairness issue, and then there's a perverse incentive issue. Because at some point, when the carbon prices start rising, these guys who have been spearheading regenerative agriculture will have the right set of incentives to start plowing up their soil, releasing all of the carbon back into the atmosphere. And so we should be paying for soil carbon maintenance in the same way as we're paying for additional soil carbon. I think that's really, if I have one message, that's the one. And then on the question of permanence that you were asking, how are we sure if a farmer can leave a program at any given point? Today, we work with a buffer, so 20% of the certificates, carbon credits that a farmer generates are put into a buffer for 10 years. We sell them after 10 years if the soil carbon has been maintained and the farmer receives the proceeds of that sale. That doesn't guarantee that the farmer is going to do that, but it does provide the right set of incentives. And if we were able to guarantee... Yeah. And if we were able to guarantee, the carbon credits would be a whole lot more expensive, obviously. And then in terms of measurement, the way it works today is it's model-based. So there's a lot of scientific literature that tells you over a longer period of time how soil carbon will progress given certain practices and certain soil characteristics. So we can plug in practices and characteristics and extrapolate the levels of carbon there. But we need more on-field measurement systems, and we're looking to adopt them as soon as they arrive and they achieve the right level of consensus.
Oh, that was great. You want to say something as well? No. Well, then I'll thank you all for being part of this panel, for the interesting thoughts and sharing your experience and also like perspectives. And also a big thanks to the audience for your patience for sticking for 10 more minutes. Just to say, so this was a warm-up session for tomorrow's deep dive into co-designing the mission programs of EIT Food. So you're wholeheartedly invited also to tomorrow's sessions to dig deeper, interrogate deeper, suggest proposals, make us succeed in making this mission meaningful, impactful, and scalable. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you.
Picture all together? Yeah? Maybe for example, sure, because we said yeah, we put here. I want to talk with you. Our face to look good. Maybe here. Yeah, but the light in the face, I say that darker. Maybe you can put it in that side.